Welcome to Days of Old Voice, where history comes alive through the stories that shaped our world. I'm your host, and today we're diving deep into one of the most incredible military victories ever recorded. If you've ever wondered how ancient commanders achieved the impossible, how strategy and engineering could overcome overwhelming odds, or what really happened on history's greatest battlefields, then you're in the right place. We cut through the myths and legends to bring you the truth behind history's most fascinating moments. So settle in, because we're about to journey back over 2,000 years to witness Caesar's greatest triumph. Let's begin. How did Caesar win at Alesia? The truth behind the miracle. Ancient Rome's greatest battle. In the year 52 BCE, deep in the heart of Gaul, one of history's most extraordinary military confrontations was about to unfold. A battle so improbable that many consider it Julius Caesar's greatest triumph and one of the most remarkable feats of military engineering and tactical genius ever recorded. The Siege of Alesia would pit approximately 60,000 Roman legionaries against a combined Gallic force of over 330,000 warriors. Yet somehow, impossibly, Caesar would emerge victorious. And the secret to his success wasn't just courage or luck, but a combination of brilliant strategy, revolutionary engineering, psychological warfare, and the iron discipline of the Roman military machine. To understand how this miracle happened, we must first travel back to the desperate situation that led to this confrontation. When the great Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix, having united the fractious tribes of Gaul under a single banner for the first time in their history, decided to make his stand at the hilltop fortress of Alesia, believing its natural defenses would protect his army while relief forces gathered from across Gaul. Caesar had been campaigning in Gaul for 6 years by this point, conquering tribe after tribe. But Vercingetorix represented something new and dangerous, a charismatic leader who understood Roman tactics and had successfully employed a scorched earth strategy, burning Gallic towns and crops to deny Caesar's army supplies and forcing the Romans into an increasingly precarious position. After a failed Roman assault on the town of Gergovia, where Caesar suffered a rare defeat, Vercingetorix made the fateful decision to retreat to Alesia, a fortified settlement of the Mandubi tribe, situated on a plateau called Mont Auxois, surrounded by rivers and valleys that seemed to make it virtually impregnable. When Caesar arrived with his legions and surveyed the situation, he faced a commander's nightmare. The Gallic position was naturally fortified on all sides, with steep slopes protecting the approaches, and a direct assault would be suicidal, costing thousands of Roman lives with no guarantee of success. But Caesar was no ordinary commander, and rather than throw his men against Alesia's defenses in a conventional siege, he conceived a plan so audacious that his own officers must have questioned his sanity. He would build a wall completely surrounding Alesia, trapping Vercingetorix and his 80,000 warriors inside, effectively besieging them and cutting off their supplies. This wall, called a circumvallation, would stretch for 11 miles in a complete circle around the hilltop fortress. But Caesar's genius, or perhaps madness, didn't stop there, because he knew that Vercingetorix had sent messengers before the siege began, calling for every Gallic tribe to send warriors to Alesia to break the Roman blockade. Caesar understood that he would soon face a massive relief army attacking from the outside, while Vercingetorix's trapped forces attacked from within. So he ordered his legions to construct a second wall, a contravallation, facing outward to protect against this external threat, essentially creating a double siege where the Romans would be sandwiched between two enormous enemy forces. The construction of these fortifications represents one of the greatest engineering achievements of the ancient world, built in just 3 to 4 weeks by Caesar's legionaries who were as much builders as they were soldiers, trained in the art of military engineering that made Rome's army so effective. The inner wall, facing Alesia, was 11 miles long and included a trench 15 feet wide filled with water diverted from nearby rivers, followed by 2 more trenches, each 5 feet deep, with the innermost one filled with sharpened stakes. And behind these trenches rose a timber palisade 12 feet high, with a walkway for sentries and regularly spaced towers rising another story higher for observation and artillery. But the real innovation lay in the defensive obstacles Caesar had his men construct, a series of traps and hazards that would later become standard in military siegecraft. The legionaries dug 5 rows of sharpened tree branches embedded at angles toward the enemy, camouflaged with brush, and called cippi by the Romans, meant to impale charging warriors. And in front of these they buried thousands of stimuli, wooden stakes with iron hooks protruding at angles designed to cripple attackers. And finally, closest to the walls, they concealed lilies, conical pits 3 feet deep with sharpened stakes at the bottom, covered with light brush to appear as solid ground, that would collapse when stepped on, sending warriors plunging onto the spikes below. The outer wall, the contravallation, stretched even longer at 14 miles and featured identical defensive works, meaning Caesar's army had constructed 25 miles of fortified walls, dug hundreds of thousands of cubic feet of earthworks, installed countless traps and obstacles, and built 23 forts at strategic points along the walls, all while maintaining constant vigilance against attacks from the trapped Gauls inside Alesia and foraging for supplies to feed 60,000 men, a logistical challenge that would break most armies. As the walls neared completion, Vercingetorix faced an impossible situation. His supplies were dwindling, his warriors were beginning to starve, and the Roman noose was tightening. So he made the brutal decision to expel all civilians from Alesia, the women, children, and the elderly numbering in the thousands, hoping Caesar would let them pass through his lines, or at least feed them, which would strain Roman supplies. But Caesar, in a move that reveals the ruthless pragmatism of Roman warfare, refused to let the refugees through, and they remained in the no-man's land between the Gallic and Roman positions, where they slowly died of starvation, within sight of both armies, a psychological weapon that demoralized the Gauls while reminding Caesar's legionaries of what was at stake. Then, after weeks of waiting, the horizon darkened with the relief army, an enormous coalition force estimated by Caesar at 250,000 warriors, though modern historians suggest it might have been closer to 100,000 to 150,000, still a massive force that represented almost every Gallic tribe, united in a final desperate attempt to save Vercingetorix and drive the Romans from Gaul forever. The relief army was commanded by 4 chieftains, including Commius of the Aribates and Vercassivelaunus, a cousin of Vercingetorix, and they immediately began probing the Roman defenses, looking for weak points in Caesar's fortifications while coordinating with Vercingetorix inside Alesia for a simultaneous assault from both directions. The first major attack came at dawn, with the relief army throwing themselves against the western section of the Roman outer wall, while Vercingetorix led his warriors out of Alesia to assault the inner wall, and the Romans suddenly found themselves fighting on 2 fronts, manning both walls simultaneously, while arrows, spears, and sling stones filled the air from all directions. Caesar had positioned himself at the highest point of his fortifications, watching the battle unfold, and he wore a red cloak, the palumentum of a Roman commander, so his men could always see where he was and draw courage from his presence. And throughout the day he rode from one crisis point to another, directing reserves to shore up weak sections and personally leading counterattacks when Gallic warriors breached the defenses. The fighting was brutal and desperate, with Gallic warriors trying to fill in the Roman trenches with bundles of sticks and dirt, while Roman artillery, ballista, and scorpions fired iron bolts and stones into the massed attackers. And hand-to-hand combat erupted wherever the Gauls reached the walls, with legionaries using their short gladius swords and rectangular shields in the tight, disciplined formations that had conquered half the known world. After hours of intense combat, the Gallic attacks faltered, having lost thousands of warriors to the Roman defenses without achieving a breakthrough, and the survivors retreated to regroup and plan their next assault, dragging their wounded with them while the Romans frantically repaired damaged sections of wall and replaced exhausted units with fresh reserves. And that's the true story of how Caesar won at Alesia, not through divine intervention or pure luck, but through brilliant strategy, revolutionary engineering, and